Good morning, welcome. As Felicia said, my name is Erica Martin. I am the Director of Training here at Get More Math, but I was a classroom teacher for 14 years before I took this position. I had 2 years at the middle school and then 10 years at the high school. And my last 2 years at the high school, I was lucky enough to not only use Get More Math in my classroom, but also make some fundamental shifts in the way I provided practice and in the way that I assessed my students. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. And hopefully if you relate, some of these solutions might work for you as well. First, I want to talk about my story, which I really think is very similar to probably your story, which I like to say is our story as math teachers. I've trained so many teachers across the country now that I will tell you, it doesn't really matter where you're teaching math. We all seem to have very similar struggles and frustrations with our students. I'm then going to dive into how I made such a significant change by including mixed review every day, almost every day, as often as I could, and how that affected my students' long-term retention. We're also going to take a quick look at the student experience within Get More Math and what the practice actually looks like. Then we'll take a quick dive into exams and how a shift from chapter tests to cumulative tests can make a real difference with your students. And then at the very end, we'll talk about the training we offer and the free trial that Get More Math allows for actually an entire school year. So if you're new to this and you sign up right now, it's not just a 30-day trial. It will actually last throughout the summer and the entire next school year, so through June of 2021. So we really give you a whole year to kind of test it out and see those results that we are sure will happen in your classroom. So let's go ahead and get started and take a look at my story. I'm curious, how many of you math teachers out there can relate to this particular picture? It's a typical day. What do you do? In general, you're going to teach some sort of lesson focused on some mathematical content. You're going to do some guided practice, and then ultimately your students are going to have to do some independent practice to show you that they did learn the material you just taught. It's what most of us do. That's how we were taught math. We take that day, we chunk it together with similar days just like it, centered around some sort of central concept. Maybe it's a chapter, maybe it's a unit. And at the very end of that unit, what do we all do? We have to give a test. We have to have some way of knowing, did our students actually learn that material? But any good math teacher will tell you, what do you do the day before a test? Well, you have to review. Why do you have to review? Well, because in reality, some of your students are already forgetting the material that you taught just in the beginning of that unit. So you've got to refresh their memory, you're reviewing, you give a test, you take the grades. You may notice there were a couple skills that lots of students missed. So usually after the test, you might take some portion of the next day to review those errors. Hopefully your students will learn from their mistakes, because guess what? It's time to move on. We've got to go to the next unit or the next chapter. And we do that over the course of an entire year. And then at the end of the year, what do we give them? Final exam, maybe a state test. We give them some large assessment on a year's worth of content, and we think they should get it. They knew every unit, they passed all of the tests, it should have stuck. Well, folks, let's have a reality check. It's not actually, this isn't what's really happening. Are they really just reviewing for the test? How many of your kids are cramming? How many teachers are actually supporting that cram? I will be honest, I used to take the test, I would change some of the numbers, a 7 to a 5, a 10 to a 12. I would cross out the word test, I'd write review on the top, and I'd give it to my kids, and I thought, well, as long as they can do this, they should be able to do it tomorrow. That's not reviewing, that's cramming. And then what did my students do after that test? I would give the test back. Did they review their mistakes? Did they practice their errors? Did they really want to remediate that? No. It was like a flush. It was like a sigh. If I could see the knowledge seeping out of their ears, I swear they were ready to clear their brain out, because what was coming next? A new unit. They needed to fill it up with all the new information. And so what was actually happening in my classroom is I would take this unit, I'd give a test, I'd move on to the next unit, give a test. And so by the time I would get to the third unit, the fourth unit, what was happening to those first three? It's getting fuzzy. I haven't really been addressing it. They haven't been practicing it. So when you do that throughout the year, by the time you get to April or March, what's happening to the content from September, October, and November? Are they remembering any of it? I wouldn't even say it's fuzzy. Sometimes it's all but blank. So when I get to the end of the year and it's time to take that big test and I think, okay, I just need a few days to review. I wasn't reviewing. I would give my students a concept and they would say to me, Mrs. Martin, you never taught me this. Oh, I know I taught you this. I can prove to you that I taught you this. You did this. It was day after day after day of like reteaching all of this content. And I thought, this isn't working. Now, it wasn't just working for me. It also wasn't working for a man named Josh Britton. Josh Britton was a teacher in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. He taught for 20 years, but after his very first year, he got to the end of the year, he gave his final exam, and almost all of his students failed. And he was devastated. He thought, wait a second, how did they all fail the final when I was here? I know I saw them learning the math. I know I saw them doing the math. How did we get to the end of the year and nothing stuck? And he thought, well, if this is what I'm doing every day, this needs improvement. This needs to change. Here's what he realized. I can't take every day and only provide a lesson and then provide focused practice on that lesson unless I start to reach back in a mixed review fashion as often as possible. So he started to think about that mixed review. What would it need to look like in order to really build long-term retention over the course of an entire year? Well, first of all, it would have to be cumulative. It really needs to reach back all the way to the beginning throughout the entire year. But if he were to make that, if he had to make some sort of additional practice that was constantly cumulative, as time went on, he really needed it to be individualized for every kid. Because you all know, we have so much content to cover in a year. You get to January, February, and March, what every student needs to be reviewing, what needs to be pulled back is going to vary from student to student. So he thought to himself, okay, so I need to build in mixed review. It needs to be cumulative. It needs to be individualized for every single student. How is that possible? How can any one teacher do that for 120 students? Well, we can't. And that's why most of us don't do this. That's why we stick with the old paradigm, because that's what's possible. Well, let me tell you, there are certain things that computers do better than humans. And providing this kind of review is something that a computer can do. So what Josh did is he built himself, over the course of 20 years while teaching in a classroom, a program called Get More Math. Now, Get More Math will not only just provide the mixed review that I just talked about, that is individualized and cumulative, but it'll also provide that focused practice, the practice that relates to the lesson that you just taught. But you know what computers don't do so well, at least in our opinion? Notice that I'm not highlighting the lesson portion. Get More Math has no instructional component whatsoever. We feel that the teacher in the classroom will always be the best person to provide that instruction. And so it's purposely not part of our app. We just want to make the decisions for you on what those students need to practice based on the mixed review that you've started. Okay? So that's my story. I'm wondering if it sounds like your story. And I'm wondering if it does, if you can relate to that cram and flush or the forgetting at the end of the year. Does it also resonate with you that mixed review on an everyday basis could truly make a big difference for your students? Well, let's take a look at what that looks like for a student. So we've got this pie chart again. Let's take a look at what it would look like for one particular student. So we've got my whole class here hanging out in lesson land. I've taught a lesson. After I teach that lesson, we're going to do some guided practice together. And I don't know about you, but I always found that my students weren't always ready for independent practice at the exact same time. There were certain high flyers that were ready earlier than others. So we're going to take a look at one of those. His name's Freddie. And I'm going to move Freddie into that practice set. Now, the beautiful piece is Freddie can move into the practice set while I'm still working with the rest of my class in continued guided practice. Now, here's what Freddie is going to see when he logs into the app. So this is a look at the student app, Get More Math. He's logged in. Remember, this is the focus practice on the skills that I just taught. So I clearly just taught a lesson on slope. You'll see that above the word slope, it says 0 of 9. That's my practice set goal. What Freddie knows is that he needs to get 9 points before he gets to move into mixed review. You'll see 3 red squares at the top of the screen. Each square is a different skill that I, the teacher, chose related to the topic for this particular practice set. The one outlined in blue is highlighting the skill that relates to the question you'll see below. So let's take a look at how this works. Freddie's going to go ahead and answer this question. Because he gets it right, smileys fall and he's earned his first point. It's fantastic. Now, we've moved over to the next skill. We're asking for slope in terms of 2 ordered pairs this time. And let's see what happens if Freddie makes a mistake. He enters this answer and it's wrong. So Get More Math is going to communicate to him that it was incorrect. But something happens here that's a little different than some other apps. We're not going to give him a new problem of this type until he fixes his mistake. So he's going to have to look back at his notes. He's going to have to check his work. He's going to have to try again. And if he tries again, and this time he gets it right, when he submits the answers, he still gets smileys. But take a look at the top green ribbon. How many points does he have for today? He still has 1 point. Well, I'll tell you, when I used Get More Math in my classroom for the first time, I had all kinds of kids telling me that this program must be broken because that should say 2. They did 2 problems. And it was a perfect opportunity for me to explain to them that no, that doesn't say 1 problem today. It says 1 point today. And points are earned when you answer a question correctly on the first try. However, if you get a problem wrong, you must fix it in order to get a fresh new problem that could be worth a point. Wow, let me tell you how that small detail made such a significant difference in my classroom, and here's why. When I would give my kids practice, worksheet, book, whatever the case may be, most of them had one goal in mind. I want to be done. They would rush through the work. You know what happens when you rush through math. You're making silly mistakes. They would subtract the negative and forget to change it to a positive, but they would rush through and they would be done and they would hand it in. And what was happening was they were making that error after error after error. So my practice didn't reinforce the mathematical skills at all. My practice was reinforcing mistake after mistake. What they just practiced was a mistake several times. With Get More Math, I was like, whoa. So now when you make a mistake, I have to identify it the first time you make it. Maybe they find it on their own. Maybe they don't. A lot of times they don't, and I'm involved. I have a dashboard. I can see everything the kids are working on. I would connect with that kid and I might have to say, Freddie, look what you missed here with the negatives. But Freddie didn't make that mistake 10 times on a worksheet. Freddie made it once and then he had an opportunity to do it again. Now, some of your kids are going to be frustrated with that. It's okay, because something happens with that frustration. They realize, okay, if I want to get done, I have to earn a point. In order to earn a point, I have to get it right on the first try. So guess what happens? Guess what they do? They slow down. They check their notes. They start taking better notes. They start caring about whether the question is right or wrong. It really starts to put a focus on deeper understanding and showing it versus just rushing to get finished, which was huge for me. Now let's keep going. If I answer this fresh new problem that is worth a point and I get it right, you'll see I went from 1 point to 2 points. I can do that again. I've now got 3 points. Let's go ahead and fast forward. We're at 6 of the 9. We're going to keep zipping through these problems. This is that focused lesson. It's all on the material I just taught. I'm about to get my 9th point, and look what happened to my screen. Suddenly I have all these squares, and the top green ribbon doesn't say slope anymore. It says mixed review. So what just happened is Freddie just shifted from that practice set into that daily cumulative portion of our practice. Now, there's a lot going on here. Let's take a look. You'll notice that we've got lots of squares. Remember, each square is a skill that I've taught at some point this year. So every practice session becomes part of the mixed review. You'll also notice lots of colors. Certain squares are red, others are yellow. We see green, silver stars, and gold stars. All of those colors are various proficiency levels that this particular student has reached per skill. So it's a nice quick snapshot of where your kiddos are for the entire year. Now, the most important thing about this screen is the dollar signs. Remember, when Josh built this, he wanted his mixed review to not just be cumulative, that's just all the squares, but he wanted it to be individualized from one student to the next. And he does that through the dollar signs. He takes all of the data that we have on the students for every skill, and he has this very intricate algorithm that decides which skills this student needs to be practicing most. And he puts dollar signs on those skills. Meanwhile, if you were to look at your neighbor, they'd have the same collection of squares. They would have different color ratings based on that student, but they would also have different dollar signs, so that the student is really focused in on what they need to do most, and the teachers don't have to do any of that at all. Now, if you're looking at this, you'll notice that we don't just say, guess what, Freddie, you have to focus on all the skills that you're the worst at. Let me tell you, you'd have a bunch of very defeated students that would stop working quickly. We don't do that. What we say is, hey, which skills are you still pretty weak on? You're gonna get dollar signs on some of those, but you're also gonna get dollar signs on skills that maybe you're quite good at, but it's been a while since you've seen it, because that's why kids don't retain stuff. If it's not constantly being brought back, they forget. So most students are gonna go ahead and pick this silver dollar sign. We're gonna get this one right. Smileys fall. You'll notice that we took the dollar sign away. Otherwise, those kids will just work that problem all day long. He can keep earning points, and that's what the mixed review looks like. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about exams. Do you remember this slide? We constantly assess our students in terms of chapters. Is it really fair at the end of the year when we say, oh, by the way, now it's time to take a test on 12 chapters? Good luck. Something else needs improved. We've already improved our daily practice. How can we take those chapter tests and really improve them by constantly making them cumulative? I think most teachers don't do that because it's very hard to build them. If we take a unit and we're reviewing almost every day, this is what I did in my classroom. I didn't need a day of review before the test. I didn't need the cram because my students were reviewing every day. So I would tell them, listen, on any test I give, any material that I've taught, with the exception of the week prior, is fair game on a test. It's in your review, you're constantly cycling, that's how your tests are gonna work. So it would include the week prior. And I built them that way as the year went on. So on my second unit, I didn't include the week prior, but I absolutely included the 3 weeks before that. It just got a little bit larger. And then when I got to the third week, same thing, it got a little bit larger than the one before. And when I started doing this, my students were like, well, okay, Mrs. Martin makes me review every week. Every test includes a portion of that review. And so if you do that and you get to the very end of the year, my kids, I had 11th graders in Algebra 1, very, very low, very high special ed population. They were not scared of that big test because that big test wasn't so big to them. It was just the last test of the year. It was the next test, because they had been reviewing all year long. Now, we do provide exams in Get More Math. You also have the ability to make decisions on flexible grading. So it's not like it's just right or wrong and they get what they get. You're always in control. You get to see every question and decide whether you want to give full, partial, or no credit. We also offer individualized corrections. So again, that flush idea, oh, I never have to think about chapter 2 material again. Nope. In Get More Math, we can actually craft the mixed review following an exam so that they have to correct their mistakes and practice those errors. And then we offer individualized follow-up exams built individually for every student based on the skills that they missed on the exam. Then I used to analyze those results, see how they did on the exam, how did they do on the follow-up, and that information would actually inform the next exam that I gave. So here's a quick look at the exams. Super easy. You're just going to take the lessons you've already built to make them. There's a quick sneak peek of what the flexible grading looks like. You'll see that on any student, you can give full, partial, or no credit. Here's the corrections mode. So for this particular student, he missed 5 questions on his test. So the next time he enters mixed review, those 5 questions will be above his mixed review content. He's required to fix his error and earn a point on a fresh skill. Once he does that, then we'll allow him to practice both above the dotted line on the test corrections and below the dotted line in the mixed review. Every student will have their own individualized follow-up exam. Here you can see this student has a test with just 5 questions because those are the 5 skills he missed. So we're giving him an opportunity to redeem himself and show us, did we actually make progress? You can take a look at this analysis. Let's just drill down to one particular student. You can see Timmy got a 15 out of 20 on his test, but a few days later, he actually got 3.5 out of 5 on the follow-up quiz with those skills that he missed. That was the data that made a real difference for me. Okay, so I know we're getting close here. I just want to wrap up with some information on our free trial. If you head to our website, getmoremath.com, you'll find lots of great information. I want to make sure everyone's aware that we cover 4th grade all the way through geometry. There will be a big green button that says free trial. If you click on that button, you will see a web form where we're going to ask for your information. Now, I know we have lots of international callers on the call today, so I wanted to point out that there is a slider about midway through that says type your school information. Obviously, you wouldn't have a state to select. If you just slide that over, then you'll have some options to choose your country and type in your information. We are happy to provide trials to international customers as well. And then from our webpage under resources, I just wanted to point out that we do offer free training sessions. We've got 3 different levels, level 1, 2, and 3. They are throughout the day, Monday through Friday. You actually meet with a Get More Math trainer and have a live group training session. We also have a great library of recorded webinars, in addition to an on-demand academy where we've got 17 different courses on how to fully utilize the app, and you can check that out as well. And so that's it. I just wanted to thank you guys for joining. If anybody has any questions, and then I listed 2 email addresses there, one for support, that's where you'll get access to our trainers. We're all classroom teachers that use the app in the classroom, and then the info at getmoremath.com is for sales related questions. That's all I've got. Felicia, questions?